Hey there, hopefully you're watching this video from some very far off timeline like 2040 or 2060 or like even the 22nd century because I want to document this one year, 2025, where coding was completely different from every time beyond that and every time before that. And this is because before 2024, LLMs did not help people a lot. Programming was still done with Stack Overflow, GitHub, online tutorials, or basically just knowledge learned from books. 2024 was when people began to use ChatGPT to generate code snippets, to basically talk out architecture and things like that. But even now, ChatGPT was making a lot of mistakes and was basically useless. Starting 2025 is when Anthropic released Sonnet 3.7, which according to me is one of the first models that was properly able to write code. I mean, there were models that were generating code before, but they were not able to properly integrate with your developer environment so that they can go hand in hand while you're actually writing code. And the first software that was actually able to do it was Cursor combined with Sonnet 3.7. And behind me, if you see, is my set of prompts that we are going to discuss in this video, because this was the first time where prompt based programming was a thing. I can think of like 3 different times where I debugged like a singular line, but Cursor was writing all my code, and this was 2025. Now you might ask, people are still writing prompts, right? So what is different about 2025? Now the difference arises that if you look at this, starting from this portion and all the way till here, this entire thing was hand typed by me. I mean, I had to give this big of a prompt to execute a simple statement. What this thing is, we'll go through it. That's basically the entire video. But right now in 2026, the way I write code, I generate files like todo.md, architecture.md, and a bunch of markdown files by using one-line prompts. And then I say /goal, follow todo, make no mistakes. But this period in 2025 was where you had to be very detailed. So if you look at this was my profile model. I am saying line by line, variable by variable on what this thing needs to be. I was also specifying what and all things needs to be used by this particular structure. And all these things was part of this prompt. Now let's begin going through it. So if you look at this, now this was supposed to be for an app called as Match My Vibe, which was supposed to be a music-based dating app, which later evolved into a friend finding app. You can find out all about this in this video over here. But basically, what you have to know is that this was about early April or like May 2025. And I had zero idea about how to write backend code. And that is why this prompt starts with this. You have to define a role for your prompts or something like that. So here I was saying that you are my backend engineer. People still do this to some extent, but today the models are so advanced that they understand what their role needs to be and everything, and they automatically take up a lot of things on their own. But here, not only did I have to specify its role, but I also needed to say very exactly on how the authentication system needs to work. For instance, here back then I was using Spotify URI, or basically a unique ID that Spotify gave me, and I had to be very exact in the way in which Spotify API returned me things like its access tokens, refresh tokens, and expiry dates. Very specifically, if you even look at this, nobody gives these kind of structure elements these days, right? We communicate with our LLM, we tell it, can you generate a structure? And then we approve changes. But back then, you had to be very exact about what you wanted. And again, I was using Cursor, but internally it was running Sonnet 3.7. So the first main thing was that roles had to be specified. And the second thing about 2025 was that you had to be very detailed about your architecture. And the third thing, which I'm pretty sure nobody's doing right now, and I have completely stopped doing it 6 months back or something like that, is something called as file tagging. In 2025, if the model had too much context, the hallucination was insane. Like right now, if you think about hallucination that starts at 600k tokens or something like that, hallucination in 2025 used to start at basically 20,000 tokens. So you had to be very specific that this is the file you need to make changes. And in most cases, I had to create the file myself and create some basic code stubbing and things like that. So in this case, I'm saying in photo upload view, I'm not only saying which file needs to change, I'm also saying which particular function and which particular UI element needs a change. And after doing this, I specify few other files that need changes. And also I mentioned that this view is not very generic and almost the same. and can be used for some changes. So what I mean by not very generic here is that this particular code has to be written again and again or something like that. But what you need to pay attention here is that not only am I specifying these file names, but I'm also saying in what ways they need to behave similarly. And I say, can you make it generic to support height selection also? But I have to give so much importance to what it needs to do and also what it shouldn't do. Because if you look at here, please do implement these and leave no to dos. I mean, we still do things like, make no mistakes and all. But back then, different to dos were generated by cursor, and sometimes a to do used to be randomly forgotten by it. So a singular prompt was like this long, used to take about 10 minutes to type, and then about another 10 minutes to maybe debug if there was something. And you have to manually approve each changes line by line, because if it was hallucinating at some point, you can at least fix it before approving the changes. But right now, it has been a while, I'm not even approving changes, I'm always on auto accept. Back then, line by line approving was super important. You absolutely had to do it. If you auto accepted any change, the model used to go berserk and it used to generate random shitty code. You could also have auto accept even back then, but it always generated shitty code. Now, the next prompt that we are going to discuss is something that I'm super proud of. Because if you think about 2024 and all, right? If I had to write the onboarding for my app, it used to take me at least a week or 2 weeks. But here, not when I just sat down on paper, prepared how my onboarding should look like. Then I wrote this big of a prompt, being very particular on what each onboarding step should be. For example, in this birthday input, so I had like basically been like a little cringy because it was going to be a dating app, right? So I was like, so username, when was the first time you ever cried? And then I go ahead to say in the subtext that even though we are asking for your age, it's also to convey that we have engineered this app in a way to make you cry on your quest for love. I don't know what cringe things I were doing there, but even here I had to be super precise that even on the alert view, this is exactly what I want and things like that, right? Now, even though this prompt is this big, it took about 10 minutes to generate the entire onboarding flow. I had to fix a few things like the way the progress bar looks and adding a back button and things like that. But for majority of purposes, the entire onboarding was ready in 10 minutes. Going from 7 to 14 days, cutting it down almost to 10 minutes to create an entire onboarding was when I actually realized how advanced AI has actually become. That was super great back then. But if you think about it, the specification of things that go here are still huge. Like, look at this. And then not only do I specify where these things needs to be, authorize Spotify needs to happen in app delegate, and I go ahead to tell what authorize Spotify does. I don't leave anything for the imagination of the model at this point. And I also say this is how it looks. Even back then, I used to create roadmaps, but then the roadmap was a lot more defined. Each JSON object used to be like very properly specified from their name to their data type because we wanted no changes. And also, the name of each variable was to be explicitly specified, because if you did not specify, it just used to randomly assume names no matter if it was present in the same file or not. And also there's these things like XML tags, and XML tags were used to categorize data within a prompt, because that is how internally the system prompts look for LLM. There are a bunch of XML tags like system prompt, instruction, and a bunch of XML tags like that. So if you wanted to do something, you could also add your own XML tag. Some people prefer JSON. I used to prefer XML tags to do this. If you think about, was just a way in which a prompt could be segregated in its own thing. Now again, here, this is one of my favorite albums. It is like Silin or Kadil, and I had to be like very specific about what these things needs to be. And again, a couple of more roadmaps if you see. But just look at the size of these prompts, right? uh like, okay, we'll come back to this, but think about this is one huge prompt. And at the same time, at the end of this thing, I reiterate, do not write any code, only explain what steps you're going to take. Because sometimes if I did not write this, it used to automatically start writing code even before we started the planning step. And once this planning step was done, I had to like be very specific about don't implement yet, and I'm giving it the current goal and things like that. And here again, if you look at this, that is a pretty huge JSON. I had to be very specific on what the JSON object needs to be. And I keep saying things like, do not write any code now. You can just by looking at how specific and how capitalized I'm doing it, about how irritated I was with the model. But again, if you look at this thing has 27 pages and we are on the 10th page right now. So I'm going to quickly move ahead. This was a dating app, right? So it had like things like match expired, match retained, and things like that. I don't think plan mode was introduced just yet at this time when I was doing this. Also here, this was the time when I was like just learning about WebSockets. So I just asked Cursor, can you find tutorials for me so that I can learn WebSockets? I don't think I ever went through them, but through the course of implementing it, I eventually got to understand what WebSockets were and things like that. So it's overall it's fine. And again, while implementing these WebSockets, again between the backend and the front end, the communication was, I used to tell my backend that generate a file to my front end saying that what is the JSON structure and the way the message format for socket is for receiving and things like that. Also, I had to be super specific on if I had to use URL session or like another type, something like that. I had to be very specific on which library needs to be used, because there were multiple libraries like Gorilla, Mux, and things like that. And I had to be very specific on both ends, both on my backend and on my iOS client, on what needs to happen. Again, if you think about it, all these are like pretty huge prompts, and this one I have compressed it on size, because if you look at this, this is a pretty huge prompt, right? This keeps going. I think the prompt ends at here. I think like part of this prompt was generated with AI, because look at this. I say what is the, I think I should zoom in a little. So I'm saying like what was the old thing and what is the new thing that I need, and changes that needs to be specified. And I think this JSON object was probably generated by the backend for me, which then I passed to the front end. Because if the backend and the front end was handled within the same folder, that is basically the context having more than like say 20k 30k tokens, at which point the model will start to hallucinate. So I was handling the communication by taking messages from the backend and then feeding it back to the front end, just to eliminate hallucination. Right now, the way I build my apps, I started developing Android recently, and the way I do it is that I put the Android app and the iOS app within the same folder. I do not care about tokens. In fact, I put the Android app, iOS app, and the backend in the same folder and ask the model to do changes on its own, because it's become so advanced right now. Again, a bunch of changes like this. We are still implementing messages at this point and basically doing all these things. So while doing migration, I had to create like a migration checklist, and also had to ensure backward compatibility and stuff like that. All these things is a singular prompt. This is pretty much like 2 3 pages, right? Think about it, the size of this prompt is insane. And that is why I mean to say that writing code was fundamentally very different. You had to be very specific, but you're still not writing code as such. You're asking it, but you're giving it instructions in a much more detailed way. And yeah, each step, like handle WebSocket messages, every update the retain button or things like whatever that was. Every individual step was very specific and to the point. Nothing was left, because if I had to leave something, the LLM would make an assumption. I had to write in the cursor.md file that do not make any assumptions, always check the to do, always update the to do, and things like that. I'll simply put my cursor.md file over here. I'm not sure if that file still exists, but if I find it, I'll put it over here. And things like this, I say meticulously plan and execute these changes. Oh, dude, these are very crucial. And once the change was executed, right, I used to generate this doc as I told, and this backend docs used to be passed to our front end using an XML tag again, and this whole tag was right there. That's a lot of things, right? That's a lot of things if you think about it. And the whole JSON used to be here, and I think that is the end of this file, because this in entirety was just the backend doc. And then I was creating this thing called bubbles category and made it go like private global Bangalore and like bunch of things. And wow. And also generating the postman config was super important, because I had to test the backend in the postman before I go ahead. Today what I do is that I simply generate test cases before, and automatically the test cases run and they're auto corrected. I do not generate postman config or anything like that. It has been a while since I manually tested anything on the backend side. Even in July 2026, UI is still an issue, but backend is completely sorted. It's all fine. That's the end of this video. uh, in 2025, you had to be more specific, you had to be more detailed with the way you're communicating with AI. And I just wanted to capture this unique time frame in the world of programming with this video. Hopefully sometime some historian comes across this video and he's like surprised with the way people communicated to AI, and they were not just doing continue executing, make no mistakes, and things like that. But okay, if you had enjoyed this video, hit subscribe. If you're from the future, let me know in the comments. Maybe I am probably like 50 years old. Maybe I'm not even alive. Who knows? But that would be great. Let me know what you thought about this video. I'll be reading it from the other side and catch you up on the other side. Bye bye.